Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Woven Podcast, a way of living your uniqueness. We are your hosts, Danita and Brea.
Here I go again on my own, going down the only road I've ever known. Woo! Like a drifter, I was born to walk alone.
How much do you love this song? I mean, I feel like you bring it out when you can. It's got to be your go-to.
It is my go-to. So it was my theme song in life when I was young. Like when I was really young, I was a pitcher in baseball. Every time I walked out to the mound, I would sing this song in my head. And I was like, yeah, here I go again on my own. Like I'm on my own.
This is a deep connection.
And every time I start a new venture or anything in life, I'm like, yeah, here I go. I'm like singing it, White Snake in the background, headphones on.
Wow. I love that. I love that.
I've sang it like a couple podcasts ago, maybe even last one. What it made me think of it today was just how much we can think that we're alone in like some of our beliefs and the ideas that we have and the way that we live in the world. And sometimes you feel alone. You feel alone in this world and you're kind of wondering, am I the only person that thinks this way or believes in this stuff? If I want to give it a term, I'd give it closet spirituality. Like if I...
All you spiritual people hiding in the closet.
It's time to come out of the closet.
And I mean, spirituality now is one of those words that has been so overused. I don't use it that often, but at the same time, when we talk about the different connections we have to our body and to that inner sense of our knowing, I think we have to talk about it in terms of our mental connection, our physical connection, our emotional connection, and our spiritual connection. And that spiritual connection is really the part that it doesn't really have any words. I mean, if you're religious, you might have some strong words to describe it for yourself, or if you were grown up in a certain way, you might have that description. But what we're still talking about is the intangible, something we can't quite touch, and something that I think is ever changing too.
And I think it's elusive. Like, so when people try to describe this, it's like this elusive feeling. So you might be the person that's in the closet right now, but you kind of have this like little knowing inside of you that's like, there's something there. There's something more. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it, but I believe in something. Like, and I know it. I know that it's there. Oh, I was just going to say, for me, it was really like this elusive, like people would talk about it. And it's like, I don't get what you're saying. I don't know what you mean until I felt it. It was such a abstract idea. It's like, yeah, spirituality. Okay, cool. I'm going to church. When I was young, I did all that stuff, like I was singing and I'm like, that wasn't it. So like, where is it? Where do I find the spirituality? And until I came into myself, I didn't have it and I didn't know it and I didn't understand it.
But I have never met anyone that hasn't said, like, if you talk about intuition, that hasn't said things like, but I knew that was going to happen, or I had a sense about that and I didn't follow it, like that. I don't know if anyone exists that doesn't have some of that, unless, you suffer from something, some sort of ailment of sort that prevents that sort of knowing or connection. But short of that, I've never met somebody, when you really start talking, people kind of get that, at least intuition, or at least they realize that sometimes they have this like psychic sense of what the future is going to be, or they know there's like this, like maybe known about the past and how it's connecting to them now, or like my grandfather was like this and I feel like I'm still playing out part of his story. Like those kind of like, I don't think anyone would necessarily call that spirituality, but like this sense that there's so much more than just us. So are there ghosts hiding in the closet, Danita? Tell me about your connection to that when you were little, because I think this is sort of where this starts off. Like if you're a kid and you're hearing about monsters and ghosts and aliens and that, what do you think? How was that for you?
I was terrified. So at first I was like a little bit curious, and then it was terrified. Like there is no ghost. They don't exist. There's no monsters under the bed. None of that exists. And so if you have this feeling of being afraid, it was at night, often at night, I would have this sensation. And it was like, well, there's nothing there. It doesn't exist. And so for me, that meant it didn't exist. But did it?
I think it depends how we define ghosts and the unknown. To me, I see it as energetic blueprints that are still available at the frequency that we are currently at as humans, which I know might sound sort of like a strange thing. But to me, it's like there are pockets where energy is stronger, and it could be the blueprints of past people that were here, if that makes sense.
Explain that more.
The thing about it is for me, this isn't all that relevant. Like, this isn't something that I fixate on or even talk about. Or if I have clients that are like, I'm really aware of a presence and they can feel that, then we're working about like, what does that mean for them? What are they feeling? Like, is there fear in their body? Is there curiosity in their body? Like, it's like bringing it back to the body. And what are you aware of? And are you scared that something's going to hurt you? And if so, what is that about? Because if we're aware of something, then there's probably something inside of ourselves to learn from that, which is true for all these experiences we have.
Take it back to when I was little, being told to be afraid of it instead of having a curiosity about what it is and what it meant for me and my body. Like at 4 years old, I don't know how much you can get curious unless someone is there to kind of guide you through that curiosity a little bit. And so often we're told like, well, it just doesn't exist. And so then you know that there's this presence, or you know that there's something that's there, but you're told that it doesn't exist. So then it becomes this thing that you're afraid of because I know it, but it doesn't exist. So now what? I am now afraid of it.
So I guess for me, I was very aware of people that were dead. And I know this is like almost the same as saying ghosts, but they weren't ghosts to me. This was such a natural thing for me to be aware of the essence of people or animals. It didn't matter, or animals and people that were in the transitional phase of passing too. And then the thing that was so confusing for me is that we are taught, especially in religious context, to think of them as people. So now you're sort of imagining like an image of a person, like they were on Earth. Let's say your grandmother dies. So you're imagining your grandmother sitting there knitting on her chair, because this is what you hear when you're younger. Well, grandmother she's so happy. She's fine. She's in heaven, and she gets to knit with her friends and just have her tea. And it's so beautiful and amazing. And my little mind was like, that sounds awful. Like, that sounds so repetitive. Like, you have to do that for eternity. Like, grandma has to knit in her knitting circle for eternity. Like, this was my mind as a child. So that concept was so awful, but it was also so in juxtaposition to what I felt. And what I felt wasn't that. It was not like people become this spiritual sort of translucent version of themselves in a different frequency. To me, it's always been so much more than that. But that's the part that is really hard to explain, because it's like, well, what does that mean? And I don't think that we just stay as the person we are now when we die. I mean, I think it's anything but that, actually. I think that would be just absolutely boring and repetitive and awful. That would be hell.
For eternity, you're the same person over and over and over again.
I don't think we really want that. I think when it really comes down to it, we don't really want that. I think we want to experience infinite creative potentiality. And that is extremely multidimensional. It's extremely difficult for us to wrap our heads around.
So how do you? If you're in the closet right now and you're thinking like, I know this, I know that there's something more inside me, and I'm curious, how do you come to the point of, now I believe in infinite potentiality? Like, it kind of feels like you're going from zero to infinite potentiality in a heartbeat. How does that happen?
I think what we've been taught to do is the opposite of what we should do. So we start reading all the books. We listen to the people that know, that write the books, that put on the courses, the workshops, the priests, the shamans. I think we listen to people's messages that are outside of us. And I think the key to all of this is actually, instead of distracting ourselves and like reading all the things, listening to all the things, doing all the practices, is to actually, what I always come back to again and again, being quiet with ourselves actually allowing ourselves to explore what is inside of our body, because we have been taught for so long that everything is outside of us. And we have forgotten that we are actually the creators. We are the story writers, whether it's right now in this moment, whether it is in these other frequencies, an infinite amount of frequencies. We are still the story writers. And this idea that we're just us, like one person as a single entity for the rest of all eternity and has come up into this point, I don't think is correct. But I think we can only get to know this place within us by actually being in silence with ourselves and exploring our body from that perspective. And I don't mean like physically, like touching our body. You could, sure. But actually feeling what is inside of ourselves, coming to know the emotions, and then coming to know what's underneath those emotions.
And I think for me, I'm going to give an example of it started by completely unraveling all of my emotions, thought patterns, all of that, and really just connecting to them and facing them, but then going inside and sitting with myself for a long, long time, months. Once I'd started to peel back the layers, I could kind of see how I was shaping inside of me, not like what I'd been taught, but just me. And when I was connecting to just me and I was starting to shape and form a little bit of like what that felt like inside, and then displaying that out in the world, I could see things, small things just changing. And that was to me like just a small, tangible thing that I was able to be like, oh, that is me. That is me coming out. And it feels really good and natural and easy. And then when that started to, like, when I really started to feel that, it was like, I don't want to say the belief got stronger, but it was just like that knowing got like, I can trust this. I can trust this just a little bit more, like small steps of like just trusting it. And then eventually being like, okay, I'm going to dive into that trust. Like, what would that mean if I wholeheartedly trusted it? And life changes. Like you can see shifts change. And there's times that I feel connected to it and there's times that I don't. But when I do feel connected to it, it really feels like I can picture that future that I'd always envisioned, or I'm living it. I'm actually living it right now in this moment. Like what I had felt my life would be like, I'm living it. And so it was like, I'm writing my own story. And so that was it. That to me was like, is this spirituality? Like I asked that myself, like, is this it? Like, am I living it right now? And the answer was yes. Like it is, like I am living it. But it was a hard thing because what you'd said, when I grew up with like religion, I envisioned spirituality almost outside of myself, like something coming into me. And that was what spirituality was like God or Jesus or angels or, whispers from outside, like lending their guidance. And it was very opposite to what I had learned, to be like, oh no, it's coming from here. And I can still believe in that higher power, but it's still like me inside listening to that higher power and connecting with it.
Exactly, that higher power, if we want to call it that, which isn't a great word because it's separating something above us rather than understanding that that's within us.
I don't know how else to describe it.
This is why I always come back to it's something like infinite creative potentiality. Like I'll often say something like that, but it's however it needs to be in the moment. But I also say this is beyond words, right? Because again, as soon as we bring it back to this like individual thought, like I have to figure this all out. I have to put this in a box. I have to define it. And when I die, I'm going to continue on some sort of journey. Like it's not so much an I thing. This source connection we're talking about is all of us. This isn't an individual thing. It's also nothing that is forever. The person you are in this moment exists right now in this moment. The person you were 5 seconds ago no longer exists, right? That's done. When we also talk about the past, if I say to people, do you recognize yourself from 5 years ago? Because a lot of people, especially listening to this, are sort of on a self awareness path or a journey of sorts, trying to understand themselves more, interested in being the best version of themselves they can be, whatever that might mean. And they'll say, yeah, no, like I hardly recognize myself 5 years. Well, do you recognize yourself 20 years ago? Like, not really. Like, there's some things that we continue to bring through our lives and personality traits, but we are always changing and evolving, and we're changing in a collective consciousness way too. We also need to be very careful to stay away from this idea that this identity that we currently have for ourselves, even for the collective, is some sort of stable, true, everlasting thing. It's absolutely not. And getting used to continuous change and transformation is actually the key, because then we don't end up in hell or heaven doing the same repetitive thing for all of eternity. That is enslavement. That's what being a slave is. And I think that's what we grow up kind of thinking. We don't think of it as slave as being, but like that's what it is. It's like you're stuck in the repetitive thing.
For you, it sounds like it's your hell. I think that people live that almost every day. Like they do live that routine and that repetitiveness, and they're really comfortable. And I think that there's people out there, a lot of people that would be like, that sounds ideal to me. If I'm living in my repetition over and over again in my routine, I don't have to be afraid of anything.
But what if we said to those same people, and I mean, I have, yes, absolutely, friends and family that like love their routine, and I love that they love their routine. And we all have a routine of sorts. And I think that's okay.
Totally. But if they could picture themselves into eternity that way, they're like, perfect.
Really? You think so? I'm like, would you want to do that for the next 500 years or like 10,000 years?
I think there is, because one, they wouldn't die and people are afraid of death. I do. I think people are afraid of death. So then they wouldn't die. So that's like amazing. And then there's no like nothing jumping out at them that's new and surprising. And because that would also be terrifying for them. I actually think there's people that are like this.
Okay. Everyone listening, we're going to need some feedback on this. To me, this is so boring. Like, I don't even care if you have the most magnificent life in the world and like you are on a private jet every day and you're doing the things to all the different countries and your life is incredible and you have amazing relationships and all of that. To do that forever in the context of this physical reality in that way.
Okay, I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to see what people think. And I'm going to give them that they could live their ideal life forever if they would do it for the next 500 to 1,000 years, or if they would choose to die. I think people are going to buy ideas.
And I'm going to say this too, like the caveat that the energetic systems of the earth change and so that we can experience life in a different way from what we are doing. I'm open to that. I don't think we need to die at, say, age 90 or 100. Like, I think there could be more than that. Repetition forever, that I'm very uncomfortable with. And I don't believe that could actually be a possibility. That's not how I see how it works. But I want to know if people are comfortable with that. That really fascinates me.
I think it would be really good. Like if you can imagine like your most perfect time that you've had, or in the future time that you would create if you would live it forever. That's our poll, Brie. Yeah, we are going to find out. When I was younger, I would go on a trip with a girlfriend and we'd have a great time on that weekend. And at the end of it, when we were driving home, I would get really sad and I'd be like, oh, we're never going to have this moment again. People, they were always like, I don't really get, like, why are you so sad? And I'm like, no, but that's like, we're never going to recapture it in the exact same way, have the same laughs. Like nothing is ever going to be the same. That's how I always think of it, as is like every day it's just something different, something new, and you're never going to have that moment again. Once I was able to peel back all the layers, it was like, well, why not create the moments that I want? Because I'm never going to have the opportunity to do it again in the same way with the same people and the same connections and all that kind of stuff, because it's going to change.
Well, if we are attached to something having to be the same, then it's basically impossible to experience inner freedom, right? Because we're trying to recreate the same thing over and over again. I mean, and I'm with you. I get teary-eyed after a fun weekend or a fun vacation, or those special times with your girlfriends or guy friends where you're just like laughing so hard. There's some sadness there for me too. But also freedom, like this attachment to how things have to be, how they have to look, how our days have to be. To me, that's the definition of hell.
And I think for a lot of people, that's the definition of their safety. Like people are attached to that and they don't see it as, I feel like a lot of people would see that as freedom in some ways. Like I'm attached to all this and I can relive this the same way. And that to me is freedom.
That's because actually underneath of that, one would be doing is prioritizing safety over freedom. And so you have the safety of the knowing, and that makes you feel good, and that feels okay, and that feels heartwarming. And so there's safety there. That's not necessarily freedom, but it is safety. And safety can feel good for us.
To expand on that, like you hear people will say like, well, there's freedom and safety. That's what it is. I don't know that the idea of freedom sounds wonderful to everyone until they've had the opportunity to experience it in a different way where they don't have to prioritize safety. And I don't mean like go be reckless, but what I mean is like where you're not always concerned about feeling safe within your own body and like feeling safe to feel your emotions and feeling safe with the people that you're around. Like when you can let go of that need to survive, then you have a different way to feel. You can feel freedom in safety almost because you don't need safety.
Well, I would almost say that when this elusive spiritual connection that we are talking about,
are we?
When we feel that divinity within us, that connection, that has no words, when we know that place, there's safety in that. That's what I would argue. And that's where the safety comes from. And it's in this deep knowing of who we really are at this deep essence, which is so much more than this human body and so much more than these experiences we're having or the emotions that we're going through. To me, that's where the safety is. It's actually in the spiritual connection, and I use that word spiritual extremely loosely, but that's where it is.
I agree with what you're saying because I was terrified of death, like terrified. Like the idea of it was terrifying. Now that I've connected a little bit more to myself, it's less terrifying. There's still a little bit there that I feel like I'm going to, kind of move through and feel through, but it is definitely the idea of it. It doesn't put me into paralysis. I am finding like a safety in the idea of me as a collective and as a part of the collective.
And I don't know if I've talked about it before, but my fear of death was similar, especially when I was younger, but it was for a different reason. It was because I had this idea from wherever that when I died, it was going to be repetitive. So in my little like 5-year-old, 6-year-old mind, I had all the things I was going to do, which included riding a unicorn, going to different planets and stars and seeing angels and Jesus. And like, I had all these plans. I did them all. And then I was like, and now what? Oh my God, now you would do them all again. And so I would do them all again and again. And the repetition of that, I'm like 5, I'm 6 years old. And I actually started having nervous breakdowns, and I can laugh about it now, but like I was seeing psychologists and priests were coming over to the house. Like it was a whole thing because to me, the repetitive nature of all these amazing things that I wanted to do was not the answer. I was very aware of energy and different frequencies, but this was getting mixed with the message from the church and from my parents. The confusion and this like gripping sensation within my body was so extreme that I couldn't sleep. I just screamed and cried like all night long. Like the only way for me to move through it during the day was to be distracted, doing sports, doing things, staying busy. But if I wasn't busy, I was gripped by this terror. And this lasted years and years and years.
Yours relationship with death was like infinite routine boredom. And mine was finality. Like it was over.
This is a fun conversation.
Yeah. We do need people to let us know about how they envision the future. Repetition and like safety, and to know that they're going to live for X amount of years doing the same thing, feeling safe in their routine, or if they would want like to know that there's going to just be like infinite change, and who knows, you do not know what that change looks like.
Yeah, and it's not so much you as an identity, it's way more than that.
Okay, I want to know, I want to hear. Thanks everyone for listening, and send us your answers.
Thank you guys. Love you.
Thanks. And you can find us on Instagram at selfwoven, or you can go on our websites.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Self-Woven. You can find us on our website, selfwoven.com, to learn more about our community, where we link people embracing their unrefined, unpolished, and unrestricted way of living. Those who are looking to explore their unique energetic, spiritual, and physical essence. This is where we go deeper and share opinions and celebrate our deeper layered experiences, and where we connect in embracing authenticity, deepening our connection to ourselves and the world around us. And also, here is our disclaimer that this information shared is our opinions and experiences and is not medical advice. There has been no client relationship established, and the use of this information is at the user's own risk and does not substitute for any mental health or medical diagnosis or treatments.